My name is Daniel Reeves, and when my wife of 9 years asked me for a divorce, I said okay, not because I didn't love her, not because I wanted it, but because she asked, and I had spent 9 years believing that love meant respecting what the other person needed, even when it broke you in half. So I said okay. I moved out within the week. I hired no lawyer. I told her we could divide things fairly. I told her I would not fight her. I told her I wanted her to be happy even if happy meant without me. I meant every word. What I didn't know, what I had absolutely no way of knowing, was that while I was being decent and heartbroken and cooperative, her lawyer was constructing something that had nothing to do with fairness. Something that would have taken everything. Not just the house, not just the savings, everything. And I found out with 48 hours to spare. Before I tell you what that lawyer had planned, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if stories about good people who almost got destroyed by trusting too much mean something to you. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read them, every one. Now let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to know who I was before this happened to understand what it nearly cost me. I grew up in a working-class family in a small town that was proud of its ordinariness. My father worked at a distribution warehouse for 31 years. Same warehouse, same route through the building every morning. He was not a complicated man. He believed in 3 things with complete consistency: honest work, keeping your word, and not making more noise than necessary. He passed all 3 of those beliefs to me with the thoroughness of a man who didn't know he was teaching them. My mother was a bookkeeper at a local hardware store. Precise, patient, with a memory for numbers that skipped me entirely but apparently made an impression on the universe because I ended up in a field adjacent to it. She kept the household accounts in an actual ledger, paper, pen, neat handwriting, long after software existed to do it for her. We were not poor. We were careful. There is a difference. Being careful means you understand that what you have is not guaranteed. It means you don't waste. It means you build slowly, and you protect what you build, and you do not take risks you can't afford to lose. I carried that with me. I got a degree in civil engineering, worked for a regional infrastructure firm for 3 years, then moved to a mid-sized construction and development company, solid, family-owned, boring to describe at parties but genuinely interesting to actually do, and worked my way into a project management role by my late 20s. I was not wealthy. I was comfortable. I had built that comfort methodically, the way my father had shown me, without shortcuts and without debt I couldn't see the end of. I met Rachel at a mutual friend's dinner party when I was 29. She was 30. A marketing director for a hospitality group, sharp, organized, beautiful in a put-together way that made her seem slightly out of my league until she laughed, which she did often and with her whole face, and suddenly the put-together quality became just one layer of something more interesting. We talked for 4 hours at that dinner party. We had our first date the following Thursday. 6 months later, she moved into my apartment. 2 years after that, we got married in a small ceremony at a vineyard with 40 people, and a speech from my best man, a man named Owen, that was exactly 1/3 hilarious and 2/3 sincere. We were happy. I want to say that clearly. Not performing happy, not going through the motions happy. Genuinely, in the way that the early years of a good marriage are genuinely happy, full of inside jokes and shared meals and the comfortable shorthand that develops when 2 people commit to understanding each other. The first 4 years were good. The next 3 got complicated. Not dramatically. Not with betrayals or disasters. Just the slow, quiet, accumulating weight of 2 people whose lives were pulling in slightly different directions and who didn't find, for too long, the right way to talk about it. Rachel's career was accelerating. She was ambitious in a way that I respected completely. A genuine, hard-earned ambition that produced real results, and it was taking her into a world that I wasn't entirely part of. Events, networking, travel, a social world of industry people that I could navigate but didn't naturally belong to. My world was quieter. project timelines and site visits and evenings at home that I valued, and that she had begun to describe, in small sideways ways, as uneventful. We had talked about children for years. Decided yes, eventually. Then eventually kept receding. Then one year it came up at dinner and something in her face was different when she answered, and I filed it somewhere and didn't know what to do with it. I want to be clear about something. Rachel was not a villain in our marriage. She was a person who had grown in a direction that no longer quite matched me, and who had perhaps not been honest with me or with herself about that change for longer than was fair. But she was not malicious. That is an important distinction, because what happened later was not her. She told me on a Sunday evening in March. We had eaten dinner, she'd cooked, which she did less often now, but when she did it meant something was coming, a conversation she'd been preparing for, and we were sitting at the kitchen table with wine neither of us was fully drinking. She said, "I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to let me get all the way through it before you respond." I said okay. She said, "I don't think we're right for each other anymore. I don't think we've been right for a while. And I've been trying to find the way to say this that isn't cruel, and I don't think there is one, so I'm just going to say it. I want a divorce." The kitchen was very quiet. I heard the refrigerator hum. I looked at my wife, this woman I had been building a life with for 9 years, and I felt the specific shock of something you half knew coming fully true. That thing where part of you already understood and the rest of you refused to until the words arrived. "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Okay? I mean, not okay as in I'm happy about it, but okay as in I'm not going to fight you on this." I looked at the table for a moment. "Is there someone else?" A pause. "No," she said. And I believed her. "Is it fixable? If we tried? Therapy? Time?" "I've been thinking about this for over a year, Daniel." She said it gently. I didn't come to it quickly. I nodded. I picked up my wine glass and set it back down without drinking. "I want this to be fair," I said. "I don't want lawyers making it ugly. We're adults. We built things together. We can divide them together." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't entirely read. "Thank you," she said. "I was hoping you'd say that." We talked for 2 more hours that night. About the house we'd bought it 4 years in, a good-sized place, fair market value that had appreciated nicely. About the savings. About the investments. About the practical dismantling of a shared life. We were both calm. Both sad. In the way that ending something real makes you sad even when you know it's right. I moved into a furnished short-term rental apartment the following Friday. I did not hire a lawyer. I told my friend Owen what was happening. He said immediately, "You need a lawyer." I said, "We're doing this cooperatively. It's going to be fine." He said, "Daniel." "Owen. It's fine." She asked for this, and I'm going to respect it. We're going to be adults about it. He went quiet in the way that friends go quiet when they know you're wrong, and they've said what they can say. 2 weeks passed. I heard from Rachel occasionally, practical things, mail forwarding, a question about a joint account. She was professional. Polite. The relationship had taken its new shape, and we were both navigating it as well as could be expected. Then she told me she had hired a lawyer. "Standard procedure," she said. "My friend recommended him. He's handling the paperwork." I said that was fine. Completely reasonable. I still didn't hire one. What happened next came from a direction I never anticipated. His name was Marcus Webb. He was a paralegal, not even a lawyer, a paralegal, at the firm Rachel had hired. And he had, 3 years earlier, gone through his own divorce. A bad one. The kind that produces a specific and lasting bitterness. The kind that makes someone look at every subsequent divorce case that crosses their desk as an opportunity to conduct proxy warfare. I didn't know any of this. What I knew was what Owen told me on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after Rachel had mentioned the lawyer. Owen called at 9:45 p.m. "Are you sitting down?" he said. "Owen, sit down, Daniel." I sat down. "I had drinks tonight with Greg Heller. You remember Greg? He works at Cavendish and Park, the law firm. He does property law, but he knows people across the building." Owen paused. "He told me something tonight. I think he was telling me because he knew we were friends and he thought you should know. He made me promise not to say where it came from." "What is it?" "The paralegal handling Rachel's case. Marcus Webb. He has a reputation in that building for going extremely aggressive on asset cases. Not Rachel's idea. Nobody thinks Rachel is directing this. But Webb has apparently developed this pattern where he identifies what he thinks is the easiest target and builds a strategy around it." I was very still on the phone. "And he thinks I'm the easy target," I said. "He's been telling people in the office that this is a straightforward case. A cooperative husband with no legal representation who has been verbally offering to split things fairly with no documentation." A pause. "He's built a filing, Daniel. A comprehensive one. He's arguing dissipation of marital assets. What does that mean? It means he's claiming you deliberately mismanaged or depleted assets during the marriage. Spent money irresponsibly. Hid income. The filing argues that Rachel should receive a disproportionate share of everything to compensate for the alleged dissipation." I stood up, sat back down. "That's not true," I said. "I have never. I know that. Greg knows that. But without a lawyer reviewing this and responding properly, a judge looks at a one-sided filing and they have to work with what's in front of them." Owen's voice was careful and precise. "There's more." I waited. "The business," he said. "I had a partial stake in a small property development venture, a side investment I'd made 4 years ago with 2 colleagues. It was modest, but it had been producing income. And I had not disclosed it in the initial conversations with Rachel because, genuinely, I had not thought it was relevant. It predated our marriage by 2 years. It was documented. It was mine." "Webb found it," Owen said. "He's arguing it was grown using marital resources and constitutes a marital asset subject to equitable distribution. He's seeking 50% of the current valuation." The current valuation was significant. Not life-changing money, but significant. "The hearing," Owen said, "is in 48 hours. I held the phone. Outside my apartment window, the city was making its ordinary night sounds. 48 hours, I said. "You need a lawyer tonight," Owen said. "Not tomorrow morning. Tonight." I put the phone down, and then I picked it up and called the one person I knew who would know what to do. Her name was Diane Park. She was a family law attorney who had been referred to me 4 years earlier by a colleague for a completely different reason. She had helped my colleague navigate a complicated property matter, and I had her card somewhere, in the stack of business cards in my desk drawer that I had never thrown away out of my father's ingrained habit of holding on to things that might one day be useful. I found the card. I called at 10:15 p.m. She answered. I started to apologize for the hour, and she said, "Don't apologize. Tell me the situation." I told her everything. The divorce, the cooperation, no lawyer, the 48 hours, Webb and the filing and the dissipation claim and the business stake. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, I need you to listen carefully. Can you come to my office at 7 tomorrow morning?" "Yes. Bring every financial document you have access to. Bank statements, investment records, the business partnership agreement, tax returns for the last 5 years, everything. Can you do that?" "I'll have it. And Daniel." Her voice was even. "I want you to understand something right now, before tomorrow. Whoever put this filing together was betting on you being exactly what you've been. Cooperative, trusting, no representation. That approach is not weakness. But it left you exposed. What we're going to do tomorrow is close that exposure. Are you clear? Yes, I said. Good. 7 a.m. Don't be late. She hung up. I sat in my apartment for about 10 minutes. Then I started pulling files. I want to tell you about the 7 hours I spent in Diane Park's office, because it was one of the most clarifying experiences of my life. She was thorough in a way that the word thorough doesn't fully cover. She went through every document I brought with a focused intensity that reminded me of my mother with her paper ledger. This completely unshowy, completely relentless precision. She made notes in the margins of printed statements. She asked questions that seemed narrow and produced answers that were broader than I expected. She found things I hadn't thought to look for. This business stake, she said, around the 3rd hour, spreading the partnership documents on the table. You said it predates the marriage. By 2 years, I said. I started contributing capital before we even met. Do you have documentation of the initial contribution? The exact amount and date? In my investment account records. From the original, get it. She was already moving. Because if we can establish clearly and documentably that the seed capital was entirely premarital, the claim that marital resources grew it becomes substantially more complicated to sustain. She was right. By hour 4, we had built a clear, documented timeline of the business stake. Every capital contribution. Every distribution. Every tax record. Premarital origin, premarital funding, no commingling with joint assets. Documented. Then she turned to the dissipation claim. Walk me through every major expenditure in the last 4 years, she said. Everything over $2,000. I did. She took notes. She cross-referenced against the joint account statements I'd brought. She built a table. Every one of these has a corresponding record, she said. Home improvements? Verified. Vacation? Mutual. Car repair? Documented. Medical expense? She paused. This one. She pointed to a payment from 18 months ago. That's a medical bill, I said. Whose? Mine, I said. I had a cardiac event. Minor, a warning, they called it. I had 2 nights in the hospital and a follow-up program. I paused. Rachel was traveling for work during the hospitalization. She came back on the 2nd day. Diane looked at me. Did the dissipation claim include this expenditure? I looked at the figure, the date, the reference number in the filing. Yes, I said. It's listed as a personal expenditure with no corresponding marital benefit. A silence. They listed your hospitalization as an example of financial dissipation, Diane said. Yes, I said. She wrote something in her notepad. Okay, she said, in a voice that had something new in it. Not anger, more like the precise, cold focus of someone who has just found the exact point they needed. That is going to be a problem for their filing. We worked for 3 more hours. By the time I left her office, we had a complete counter-filing. A documented dismantling of the dissipation claim, point by point, with evidence for every response. A clear, legally supported argument for the premarital nature of the business stake. And 1 additional document that Diane had prepared quietly and handed to me at the end. What's this? I asked. A request for case management review, she said, filed simultaneously with our counter. It outlines a pattern of conduct in the opposing filing that the court will want to examine. She paused, including the hospital claim. I looked at the document. Diane, I said slowly, I want to be fair. Rachel didn't build this filing. I don't think she knew about the hospital claim specifically. I believe you, she said, and that matters. It may matter quite a lot, depending on how tomorrow goes. She looked at me directly. You are well prepared, she said. You have the documentation to defend every claim in that filing. What happens tomorrow will depend on the judge, the quality of your documentation, and how the opposing counsel handles being asked to explain certain choices in front of a court. She paused. You said you wanted this to be fair, she said. You're going to get your chance to say that in front of a judge. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Not a grand dramatic space. A working room, practical, slightly worn, with the atmosphere of a place where complicated human situations get reduced to documents and findings and orders. Rachel was already there when I arrived. She was sitting with her attorney, a man named Hargrove, senior partner, who looked like someone had ironed him, and beside Hargrove sat Marcus Webb. I had not seen Webb before. He was younger than I'd imagined, mid-30s, trim, with the specific confidence of someone who had run this play before and expected it to work the same way again. Rachel looked at me when I came in. Then she looked at Diane, standing beside me in a charcoal suit with a document case that she set on the table with the quiet authority of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Something moved across Rachel's face, something that might have been surprise. Or relief. Or both. The judge was a woman named Judge Carver. She had the manner of someone who had seen everything and found most of it predictable, and who applied that predictability as a kind of efficient compassion. She moved things along. She cut to what mattered. She was not unkind, but she was not interested in theater. She reviewed the filings. Both of them. She took several minutes. The courtroom was quiet. Then she looked up. I want to address the counter-filing first, she said. Specifically, I have a question for opposing counsel regarding the dissipation claim. Hargrove straightened. Your Honor, Item 7 in your filing references a medical expenditure as an example of financial dissipation. She looked at him over her glasses. This is a hospitalization for the respondent. For a cardiac event. A pause. Counsel, can you explain the legal basis for characterizing an individual's medical hospitalization as financial dissipation of marital assets? The silence that followed was brief and extremely loud. Hargrove looked at Webb. Webb's jaw tightened slightly. Your Honor, Hargrove said. Carefully, the intent of that item was to demonstrate a pattern of. I read the intent, Judge Carver said. I'm asking for the legal basis. Because the case law on what constitutes dissipation is fairly clear, and I am not aware of a precedent in which a party's own medical treatment qualifies. She paused. Unless you're arguing that Mr. Reeves should have foregone treatment for a cardiac event as a marital financial responsibility. No, Your Honor. Then you'll want to walk me through this item carefully. What happened over the next 20 minutes was not loud. It was the opposite of loud. It was the quiet, systematic dismantling of a filing that had been built on the assumption that the other side would show up without tools. Diane moved through the counter-arguments with the precision of someone who had spent 7 hours preparing for exactly this. Every item in the dissipation claim met with documentation. Every claim met with its rebuttal. The business stake timeline laid out clearly. Dated, sourced, argued with the kind of specificity that doesn't leave room for interpretation. I watched Webb watching Diane work. His expression did not change dramatically. But something behind it shifted. The recalibration of a person who had misjudged the situation they were in. Judge Carver reviewed each document as it was submitted. She asked questions. Sharp ones. Diane answered them directly. Hargrove answered the judge's questions about the original filing in the particular way that lawyers answer questions when they are slowly understanding that someone on their own team built something they now have to stand behind. Then Judge Carver set down her pen. She looked at both tables. I'm going to be direct, she said. The original petition contains a number of claims that the counterfiling addresses with thorough documentation. Several items in that petition are in my assessment, not supportable as filed. She paused. I am also referring the pattern of this filing, including the medical claim, to the State Bar's Conduct Review Committee for examination. Hargrove said nothing. Webb looked at the table. With regard to the business stake, Judge Carver continued, the documentation presented demonstrates clear premarital origin with no evidence of marital commingling. I am not finding this to be a marital asset subject to distribution. I breathed. Just breathed. With regard to the remaining marital assets, she said, I am ordering a 60-day mediation period for the parties to reach a mutual agreement on equitable division. Given the documentation before me, I expect that process to proceed on a factual basis. She looked at both tables. Do you understand? Both attorneys said yes, Your Honor. Judge Carver looked at me. Then at Rachel. It is my observation, she said, that the respondent in this case came prepared, documented, and cooperative. It is also my observation that the original petition appeared to be constructed in a manner that anticipated the respondent being without representation. She paused. That is a concern the Conduct Review will address. In this courtroom, we proceed on the documents and the facts. She closed the folder in front of her. We're adjourned. Rachel was waiting for me in the hallway outside. Hargrove had left. Webb had left quickly, without looking at anyone. Rachel was alone. She looked like someone who had just sat through something she hadn't fully expected to sit through. Did you know? I asked her. Directly. No accusation, just needing to know. She held my gaze. I knew he was aggressive, she said. I didn't know about the hospital. She paused. I didn't know he had listed your hospital stay. When the judge read that out, She stopped. Her jaw tightened. I didn't know, Daniel. I looked at her, and I believed her. The hospital bill was in your name, she said. It was from a joint account. He pulled it without showing me the specific items. She looked at the floor for a moment. I fired him this morning, before the hearing. When Hargrove showed me the full filing, and I saw what was in it, she looked up. Hargrove didn't know either. He's furious. I leaned against the wall. This hallway that smelled of old carpet and institutional lighting. I just wanted it to be fair, I said. That's the only thing I wanted. I know, she said. I wanted that too. A long pause. I'm sorry, she said. Not for the divorce. For how close this came to being something it never should have been. I looked at my wife. This person I had loved and was losing and had nearly lost far more than the marriage because I had trusted the process without understanding the process. Me too, I said. We stood in that hallway for another moment. Then we both went our separate ways. The mediation took 6 weeks. Diane represented me through all of it. Rachel hired new counsel, a family law attorney who specialized in collaborative divorce, which is exactly what it sounds like, and which was what Rachel had apparently wanted from the beginning, before Webb had taken the case in a direction she hadn't fully authorized. The mediated agreement was equitable. The house was sold. We split the proceeds. The joint investments were divided fairly based on contribution. My business stake remained mine, documented and untouched. Rachel received a fair share of our joint retirement accounts, which was right, and which I had never contested. It was not painless. Divorce isn't. But it was fair. The bar conduct review of Webb's filing took 4 months. I was not involved in that process beyond submitting the documented record when asked. I don't know the full outcome. I know his firm parted ways with him while the review was ongoing. I know the medical claim was specifically cited in the preliminary findings as a violation of professional standards. I know because Diane told me, briefly, when it was resolved. Done, she said. Good, I said. We left it there. A year after the divorce was finalized, I had a dinner with Owen. We went to the same restaurant we'd been going to since our late 20s. Corner table, always. Owen ordered the same thing every time because he had decided 5 years ago that he'd found his ideal meal and saw no reason to change it. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. Not the divorce. He knew that question was more complicated. He meant the approach, the cooperation, the no lawyer. I thought about it honestly. I regret the naivety, I said, not the intention. The intention was right. I genuinely wanted it to be fair. I still believe that was the right thing to want. I paused. The naivety was thinking that wanting fairness was enough to produce it. That if I showed up cooperatively, the whole thing would stay cooperative. "It almost cost you everything," Owen said. "It almost cost me the business stake and a significant amount of money." "Yes," I said. "It didn't cost me my integrity. It didn't cost me my ability to sleep. And it didn't turn me into someone who approaches the end of a relationship as a war to be won." Owen was quiet for a moment. "But you got a lawyer," he said. "I got a lawyer," I said. "Because protecting yourself is not the same as being adversarial. I had to learn that distinction the hard way." I picked up my drink. There's a difference between choosing to be decent and choosing to be defenseless. I confused the two for longer than I should have. He nodded. "How are you?" he asked. Meaning, actually. I thought about it. "Okay," I said. Genuinely. It was hard. It still has hard moments. But I'm not someone who got destroyed by this. And I was almost someone who did. I paused. There's a version of this story where I don't have your friend Greg's phone number. Where I don't have Diane's business card in a drawer. Where I walk into that courtroom with nothing and leave with nothing. I shook my head. That version is 48 hours away from being the real one. Owen was quiet. "You know what saved you?" he said. "Not Diane, not the documents." "What?" "The hospital record," he said. "He put your hospitalization in that filing. And that's what made the judge look at the whole thing differently." He paused. He overreached. People who build on greed always do. I sat with that. He was so sure I was easy, I said. He thought cooperative meant weak. He thought no lawyer meant no defense. He was building a strategy around a picture of me that wasn't accurate. What was accurate? I thought about my father, his paper ledger mother. The careful habit of keeping records, of knowing where every dollar came from and where it went. That I keep everything, I said. Every document, every statement, every receipt. I smiled slightly. My mother would be very pleased with how that turned out. Here is what I want to leave you with. If you take nothing else from this story, take this. Being decent does not mean being defenseless. I walked into my divorce wanting to honor my wife's decision, wanting to divide things fairly, wanting to end 9 years with integrity intact. That was right. That instinct was correct, and I don't regret it. But I made an error in thinking that my decency would be met with decency. That if I showed up without weapons, the other side would too. That is not how the world always works. There are people, not your spouse necessarily, not the person you built a life with, but people who operate around the edges of these situations, who see your decency as a target, who read cooperation as weakness, who look at a man without a lawyer and see a path of least resistance. You have to know the difference between choosing peace and choosing surrender. They are not the same choice. Choosing peace means, I will not escalate this. I will not bring malice to this table. I will not try to win at someone else's expense. I will be honest and fair, and I will keep my integrity through all of it. Choosing surrender means I will show up unprepared and trust that the process is clean without verifying that it is. Do the first one. Don't do the second. Because here is the truth that almost no one tells you about good faith. Good faith protects your character. It does not protect your assets. It does not protect your future. It does not protect you from people who are not operating in good faith on the other side. Know the difference. Hire the lawyer. Keep the records. Document everything. And when someone characterizes your own hospital stay as financial irresponsibility, make sure you have a Diane Park in a charcoal suit sitting next to you when a judge asks them to explain it. The other thing I want to say is this. Rachel was not the villain of this story. I mean that completely. She was a person at the end of a marriage who hired professional help and trusted that help to act in her interest, not knowing fully what acting in her interest would look like to someone operating from bitterness and assumption. We are, at the moment I'm telling you this, in the quiet, distant, cordial space that some divorced people find if they both do the work of getting there. We do not have lunch. We do not pretend. But if she called with something important, I would answer. And I believe she would do the same. That is enough. That is more than enough. What I am certain of is this. I did not become someone I'm ashamed of. I did not fight dirty. I did not use pain as a weapon. I did not try to take more than was mine. I walked into that courtroom with documentation and a good attorney and the truth. And the truth, when it's actually documented and well presented, is a remarkably sturdy thing to walk in with. My name is Daniel Reeves. When my wife asked for a divorce, I respected her wish. When her lawyer tried to use that respect against me, I found out with 48 hours to spare. And I walked into that room prepared. Not angry, not broken, not weaponized, just prepared. That's the whole lesson. Be decent, be documented. Know the difference between choosing peace and choosing to be taken. And always, always keep the business card.